Fatherly and brotherly love. From the Sermon on the Mount to the speech at the Last Supper, Jesus taught his followers to love in a fatherly way. This is a different kind of love than brotherly love. In brotherly love, you love your neighbor as yourself, which is an adequate observance of the Golden Rule. But paternal love requires you to love your fellow man as God loves you. Jesus loved humanity in two ways. He lived on earth as a dual personality, human and divine. With his divine nature, Jesus did this as the Son of God and loved man with a fatherly love. With his human nature, he did as the Son of Man and loved all mortals as his brothers. He was truly a man among men. Jesus did not expect his followers to achieve an impossible manifestation of brotherly love, but rather to strive to love perfectly, as God loves us. He hoped that his followers would be able to see their fellow man as God sees his creatures. From this fatherly view, it is not difficult to see all your fellow human beings as struggling individuals and love them unconditionally despite their shortcomings. Just as a good father loves his children unconditionally. In the confirmation speech, which has become known in your holy books as the Sermon on the Mount or as the Beatitudes, Jesus reveals to his 12 apostles the new concept of fatherly love. He did this by connecting this love to 4 different states of mind. Jesus exposed 1. The poor in spirit. 2. Those who hungered for righteousness. 3. The person who perseveres in meekness. 4. Those who are pure in heart. For people who live primarily in one of these 4 mind states, there is hope that they can grow to higher levels of divine selflessness. These people have the disposition to love in a paternal way, even if they are deprived or sad. Through this all-encompassing fatherly love, they can find strength to show mercy, promote peace, resist persecution, and in all these difficult situations, they can love their enemies with a fatherly love. Fatherly love can reach very high levels that immeasurably exceed brotherly love. The faith and love of these Beatitudes strengthen moral character and create lasting happiness. Fear and anger weaken characters and destroys happiness. This memorable speech is about happiness in its purest form. 1. Blessed or happy are the poor in spirit, the humble. For a child, happiness means the satisfaction of the desire for instantaneous pleasure. An adult, however, may be willing to sow the seeds of self-denial to then reap greater happiness. Even in the time of Jesus, happiness was often associated with possessions and wealth. In the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector praying in the temple, the Pharisee felt rich in spirit, full of self-doubt. The tax collector felt poor in spirit, humble. One was complacent, the other was studious and seeking truth. The poor in spirit seek purposes of spiritual riches, a search that leads to the Father heart of God. And seekers of truth do not have to wait for a reward in the distant future. They find the kingdom of heaven in their own hearts, and they experience this happiness in the here and now. 2. Happy are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Only those who feel poor in spirit will hunger for righteousness. And only the humble seek divine strength and crave spiritual power. But it is very dangerous to deliberately fast spiritually to force a wider spiritual bandwidth. Physical fasting becomes dangerous after 4 or 5 days. If one gets over hunger, then one can lose all desire for food. This also applies to long spiritual fasting. It can extinguish one's hunger for God. It is not so easy to teach these first two Beatitudes to children, but an adult should be able to grasp the meaning. 3. Happy are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. True meekness resists fear and anxiety. It is usually a cooperation between man and God. Your will be done. It involves patience and forbearance and is driven by an unshakable faith in a lawful universe. It overcomes all temptation to rebel against divine guidance. Jesus was a gentle man here on earth. 4. Blessed are those who are pure in heart, for they will see God. By spiritual purity, Jesus was not referring to such things as sexuality. He was referring to the faith that man must have in his fellow man. He meant the faith a parent has in his child. Just as a good father motivates and challenges his child to learn new things. By pure in heart, Jesus meant here to have an open heart toward your fellow man without prejudice or stigmatizing them. A father's love does not mean indulgence, nor does it condone evil. But it is always anti-cynical. Fatherly love is directed to only one goal and always seeks the best in man. With a pure heart, one can see God. Seeing God by faith means gaining spiritual insight. Spiritual insight increases God's guidance to man and ultimately increases God consciousness. Jesus then went on to teach his followers about the achievement of the highest goal a human being can pursue, perfection, up to the acquisition of divinity. Constantly he exhorted them, "Be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." He did not call the 12 to love their closest as they loved themselves. While this would have been a valuable achievement, it would only have been proof that they had made brotherly love their own. But he urged his apostles to love men as he had loved them, to love them with both fatherly and brotherly affection. And he explained this by wise on 4 noble responses of fatherly love. 1. Blessed or happy are those who grieve, for they shall be comforted. Neither so-called common sense nor the best logic could ever argue that happiness can be derived from grief. But Jesus was not referring to outward grief. He was alluding to the emotional disposition of tender-heartedness. It is a great error to teach young men that it is unmanly to be tender. This is the wrong way to bring brave men forward. The great men of the earth have not been afraid to grieve. Moses grieved but was a greater man than Samson or Goliath. Moses was a magnificent leader, but he was also a gentle man. Empathy is a worthy trait of both men and women. Sensitivity and receptivity to human distress create real and lasting happiness. This mildness will also protect your soul from the destructive influence of anger, hatred, and suspicion. 2. Blessed are the merciful, for mercy will be shown to them. Mercy here indicates the greatness of true, sincere friendship. Mercy can sometimes be passive, but here it is active, dynamic, and paternal. A loving parent has little trouble forgiving his child, even many times. And in an unspoiled child, the impulse to relieve the suffering of others is naturally present. 3. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the sons of God. Jesus' listeners longed for military deliverance, not peacemakers. But Jesus' peace is not of the pacifist kind. Faced with trial and persecution, he said, "My peace I leave with you. Let not your hearts be troubled, nor be afraid." This is the peace that avoids disastrous conflict. Personal peace integrates the personality. Social peace prevents fear, greed, and anger. Political peace prevents racial conflict, national distrust, and war. Founding peace is the cure for distrust and suspicion. 4. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when men shall scorn and persecute you, and shall speak all manner of evil of you unjustly. Be glad and rejoice greatly, for great is your reward in heaven. Very often peace is indeed persecuted. But young people and brave adults never shy away from difficulties and dangers. No one has greater love than to dedicate his life to his friends. And a fatherly love can do all this freely. And so it is revealed that the Beatitudes of the Sermon on the Mount are grounded in faith and love, and not in laws, ethics, and duty. Fatherly love takes pleasure in repaying evil with good, doing good in retaliation for injustice.